Welcome in, Gridiron 360, Bill and Dave, continuing our conversation about the college football preview playoff. We're going to do a little bit of it all today.
You can't have one without the other.
Right, so we're going to preview three with an honorable mention, fourth big games that we see coming in Week 13 here, and talk a little bit about them. Let's start. We'll go from the bottom up. The honorable mention game we have is the Pitt Panthers going to Virginia Tech to Blacksburg to take on the Hokies. The reason we're mentioning this is because this game could pretty much decide, not definite, but could pretty much decide who in the Coastal will face Clemson in the ACC championship game. That's why we mention it. Look, Virginia Tech had some bumps in the road early on in the year. They've found a way to get it together. It is their defensive coordinator, Bud Foster's last season.
He's an icon. Not only at Virginia Tech, but also in college football.
Right.
He's one of the true throwback, hardcore defensive coordinators.
And, you know, I'm glad to see them, after a rough start in the season, pick it up. And really, quite frankly, go on a tear. I mean, let's not forget, early on in the year, they had a little bit of a bout with Old Dominion on their own turf, with Furman on their own turf. They lost early in the year to Boston College. They lost early in the year to Duke. They had a little bit of a tussle with Rhode Island. But they have gone on a tear, beating Miami, beating North Carolina, beating Wake Forest, throttling Georgia Tech 45-0 this past weekend. And they had a close one on the road at Notre Dame where they only lost 21-20. So really, since the Duke loss, they've won all games but that Notre Dame game, and they've been on a tear.
Yep.
Defense is starting to look like the defense we expect. I feel like they're doing more from running the football instead of just trying to sling it all over the yard, and that's what we know out of Virginia Tech typically. Now, Pitt, look, both these teams go in at 7-3. Pitt has quietly had a decent season. Don't forget, early in the year, they gave a game to Penn State where they lost 17-10. Then right after that, they get the pseudo-national champions in the UCF, Golden Knights or whatever. And at that time, UCF was still on their undefeated roll of 2 years.
They were national champions.
And they go into Pitt. Who's Pitt? 35-34 Pitt. Okay.
Yep.
Pat Narduzzi, again, coaching, is a good coach. Not be like high-profile name, solid coach.
Yep.
Is able to get the most out of what he has to work with.
I agree. Here's what's interesting. To me, going back to Virginia Tech, what turned their season was when Willis went down, it was against, before the Miami game, who was that against? Duke. Mm-hmm. And Virginia Tech took a bad loss to Duke, and Hooker came in. Then they go, and Hooker came in and only got a couple of snaps. It wasn't much left in that game. And then they made a move, and Hooker came in against Miami. Now, remember, Miami was up 35-7 in that game. Mm-hmm. And I really think the second half of that game started to turn their season around. They figured something out offensively, being able to use Hooker's legs, being able to throw the ball. They came back, stormed back. Or I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Virginia Tech was up on Miami 35-7. Miami came back and tied at 35-35, and then Virginia Tech won that game. I think there was just something built off of that game. And they again, from there on out, their only loss was a road loss to Notre Dame. So they figured something out there, and I think that makes them very interesting. I think the defense, there's definitely been some inspiration from the Bud Fosters last year. They're going back to that lunch pail, which is their big thing.
The mentality. Blue collar.
Yeah, and they're getting it done and making some moves. They're looking a lot more like the Virginia Tech team that we've seen in the past with that defense. Pitt, on the other hand, like you said, I mean, understand, Pitt early in the year gave Penn State all they could handle in a game, lost 17-10. This is a team that lost, and I think it was in the first game. They lost their 2 starting D tackles, or maybe it was their first game, and then their second game they lost the other
one.
one.
Of them's back.
Yeah, so but I mean they've hit injuries, they've had quarterback issues, they've had some issues on offense, but they've given some teams some games. They've showed up sometimes, and they're a 7-3 team, so this is not a terrible team overall. And they've scrapped and they've won some games. They beat Duke on the road, who's a Duke team that blew out Virginia Tech. They beat UNC. Those aren't they had some ones that didn't look as pretty where they beat Delaware 17-14 and then they beat Syracuse 27-20. They have a tendency to sometimes play to their opponent. But this could be an interesting game. I believe you guys played Pitt last year in the title game, did you not? I remember it was a rainy affair. That was last year, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, it'll be interesting to see. Whoever wins this game, if Virginia Tech wins, they finish the year out with Virginia, so that would be the Coastal there, assuming Virginia can win out. I'm trying to remember Virginia has the tiebreaker against Pitt too as well because they beat them, so Virginia's going to have to stumble. Those are the 3 teams really in it. I mean, Miami has a very, very outside shot of getting in along the way. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how this plays out. I'll admit, as an ACC fan, I'm kind of tired of seeing 3+ losses from the Coastal Division playing for the title. Not that I in any way think that diminishes Florida State because Florida State diminished themselves. But it's just not as competitive. But this is a game where I think I like where Virginia Tech is headed.
Yeah,
and their surge.
I was worried about Fuente. I thought he was a good coach when they hired him, but he has been muddling there. And it's funny because they're not a national championship or college football playoff contender. Every team can go through a game like you said with Miami and facing adversity, and then that kind of be the linchpin of changing their season, much like us with North Carolina. We've been on a tear. Teams have to face that adversity sometimes to wake them up and know what they need to do moving forward. But yes, Virginia Tech, they're going back to what I'm used to seeing Virginia Tech doing, playing good defense, pounding the ball on the ground, and setting up some passing from that. But Pitt's not one to overlook. This is the 3:30 game on Saturday. Should be fun to watch.
Yep.
Let's move into the next game of the day, and that will be, let's go to Texas and Baylor, a little interstate rivalry as the Longhorns. Baylor gets 2 in a row at home, travel up to Waco.
Yep. Yeah, this one really is it big? I don't really know because, and again, I'm going back to what the belief and the perception from the committee's voting, but also from the national perception of the Big 12. The important part here is Texas and Oklahoma State both have outside shots to get into that final. Remember, the Big 12 is unique in the sense that they play the top 2 teams play for the title game. It's not a divisional.
2 separate divisions, yeah.
Yeah, and you've got a Texas team and an Iowa State team both at 4-3 in the conference. Baylor at 6-2. It would take a little bit of magic to knock Oklahoma and Baylor out of the top, but it's still a possibility. But again, if Baylor loses this, and for any reason Oklahoma loses to Baylor, even if Baylor still gets in there, or loses to a Texas, it just further cements that the Big 12 is not going to get a seat at the table. So, it's an important game because, number one, Baylor has surged in their recruiting, is going to surge in their recruiting, especially with the way that Matt Rhule has turned this team around. So this, to me, is more about for next year and the importance, because owning the state of Texas, it's a great high school football state. It's also a state that Oklahoma has been in quite a bit. And Texas really needs this to turn into some level of prominence. I mean, overall, they're only 6-4. And Baylor has a chance to kind of make a statement that they are the team to beat in Texas.
Yeah, I find it kind of funny because based on the rankings that we saw, especially for the top teams in Oklahoma and Baylor last night and even up to this point, you definitely see there's not a lot of love for these teams to make it. It's going to be very hard for one of these teams to make it into that 4 slot. Yet Texas at 6-4 slides in this week to the playoff, and so it's kind of like 2 different thought thought process is banging heads. It's like, well, we don't love them that much, but a 6-4 Texas team deserves to be in there. Why? Again, I said I don't think this is I think Texas last year was much better, maybe even the year before. I know Ellinger is still there. This is not the same team, and they're not as good. Understand, they get in there from beating an Iowa State team that I think slid into the back end of the rankings last week. They oh no, they didn't. They lost to Iowa State, didn't they? They did. They did. So how does that happen? I mean, look, Ellinger in the Iowa State game went 22 of 40, 273 and 3 touchdowns. The leading rusher in the game, Ellinger, 12 for 27. I know he's a runner, but you've got to be able to establish running backs running the ball too. I just don't see it with Texas, and I'll be honest with you. This game here, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if Baylor beats the crud out of them.
Yep.
Not one bit. That Baylor defense is good, and they will give, especially they had great practice last week. They had 2 quarters of great practice in the second half of the Oklahoma game, preparing for the running quarterback. Okay, so and Hurts I think is a better runner than Ellinger. So I don't understand the Texas love. I know they're a blue blood program, and maybe that's it. Maybe, again, the media or the narrative wants them to be back in the picture, but I don't know. I really think that this is a game that Baylor could beat them up and beat them up big. That's just what I think.
Yeah, they can. I mean, I guess, too, there's some importance here. Really,
I think Baylor kind of needs to, if they think they might have a shot at that 4 slot, I think they need to roll every game. That's the only way.
Yeah.
I roll every team they play the rest of the way.
And they're going to need a little bit of magic to happen. So we'll move on from that one, and the next game I want to look at is going to be the Texas A&M Aggies heading to Georgia. All right,
Between the hedges.
Yeah, this game. Let's just be simple about it. This game has nothing to do with the SEC title game, but this could play. If it goes a certain way, this could play a huge role in the national picture.
Mm-hmm. Why is that, Dave?
Well, simply put, Georgia is guaranteed their spot for the East. They only have one game left. It's this game in conference, and they would win the tiebreaker with Florida. So they have assured themselves a spot in the title game.
And they have their rivalry with Tech at the end of the year.
Yeah,
not
which is out of conference.
That's not going to be a game that
any
way, shape, or form.
Georgia Tech is probably the worst in the worst conference.
Yeah.
So
they'll be better, but they got a new coach.
They have a lot to change.
Yep.
So, but here's the thing is, again, Georgia just played a very tough-fought game against Auburn. Auburn, a better team than A&M. But A&M is not incapable of winning this game. And if Georgia comes out and plays flat, now you've got the potential for a 2-loss Georgia team going into a title game. And if they win the title,
then what happens?
Chaos ensues.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's just we're going to talk about that when we get in the championship. But that's what becomes a big game for this. Again, it's is there that potential for a letdown, and what does that letdown say if it does happen? Now, if Georgia takes care of business, you got a 1-loss team, you got a team that's going to probably remain in the national playoff picture as far as being in the top 4 as they presently are. And then obviously that SEC title game becomes big. So that's one just to keep an eye on. I don't know that there's really a whole lot to say about it. We kind of already talked about Georgia and where they're at. They're a running team. They don't allow a lot of running on the ground. Kellen Mond's going to have to play lights out. When he's played against the bigger teams, he's lost. Georgia's certainly there. They've had
this year,
yeah.
We expected him to be like a contender. We expected them to be a contender, or everyone did. I think a lot to the fact that they have a seasoned veteran who could be more than just a game manager. That was the thought process in Mond, and we haven't seen what we've seen out of him in years past. All of the Clemson game at A&M last year, where he went crazy. We haven't really seen that at all this year.
Yeah, and I think part of what I've seen in this with him is, they've gotten handled in some of those bigger games. They got handled by Clemson early in the year. They got handled by Alabama. They finished the year at LSU, so we'll see what happens there.
They played a tough game against Auburn, but it was at A&M.
Yes. Yeah, that was probably their best. But this is also a team that has only beaten Mississippi 24-17, beat Arkansas 31-27. I'm not saying it's a likelihood, but it is definitely a dangerous game for Georgia. And it will have impacts on the view of the SEC as a whole if it happens where Georgia loses.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm all for, I have no hate for the SEC. They are the best conference in college football year in and year out, even this year. How good they are compared to the rest is the difference. I mean, sometimes I think a lot of people think they're way better than there's the SEC and then there's the Roy bus. However, this is a team that they're going against a very happy Kirby Smart after last week, and I'm sure Kirby spent Sunday rolling around on his couch happy. And come Monday, he put back on the game face. He will have them ready to go. They're at home between the hedges. The fans are going to be all in full effect. Their new LED lighting system. Mm-hmm. They're going to be rocking and rolling. I don't know if it's a blackout or a red out or whatever. They're going to be ready to go. I just don't. I don't. As much as I'd like to see some of that chaos happen, just to kind of see the SEC be wiggling a little bit. I just don't see it happen. I think Georgia handles them. It might not be in explosive fashion. And that's my one concern. Because Mond, he can sling the ball. If they are able to put up some explosive plays early on and get up on Georgia, can Georgia keep pace? But I don't know that that's going to happen because Georgia's defense, I think, is too good. The running game, I don't know that they'll score. I don't think they'll give up a rushing touchdown in this game.
Probably
because
not.
Their starting running back went out early in the year against Clemson. Isaiah Spiller has done a good job coming in. He's getting better every week. But I just don't see it happening, man. And I think Georgia will end up taking care of business. They'll have a nice tune-up game with Georgia Tech before they come to Atlanta to take on the Louisiana State Tigers. The big one this weekend, and this is a big one because it really is the first formidable opponent we've seen the Buckeyes have to face this year. And the Penn State Nittany Lions will roll over to Columbus, swing on into the horseshoe, and see if they can match wits with Mr. Ryan Day, Mr. Justin Fields. Oh, wait a minute. I forgot about Mr. Chase Young. How you going to stop Chase Young, Penn State? How is Clifford going to fare when Chase Young is in the backfield on his second step off the line of scrimmage every play? That's my question.
It's a tall order, and you're going to do it with a lot of help, that's for sure. But the question is, it's not like everybody else is a chump on that defense, so you're going to leave somebody open.
Now, KJ Handler, the explosive superstar wide receiver for Penn State, I think he'll play just because it's a big game, but he is banged up, and it hasn't been definite whether he's going to be in this game or not. But they're going to have him because we know Ohio State can get explosive. And they can do it a multitude of ways. Unfortunately, what I've seen out of Penn State this year when they've had those explosive plays, who's the guy? Handler.
Yep. Oh, yeah. He's definitely the focal point there. Penn State's going to have to run the ball really well in this game, which is going to be quite a challenge against Ohio State. But they do have enough. They're definitely a running back by committee team. So it's going to be interesting to see that. They are going to need to get maybe not a lot, but they are going to need some well-timed big passing plays, as you mentioned, from Clifford in this game. I think the key is going to be, and nobody's done it yet, is going to be, can you shut that running game down enough of Ohio State to get a little bit of imbalance in their offense? I'm not saying Justin Fields can't handle it, but he hasn't really been had to prove it But I got to say he's throwing up sick numbers.
Yeah.
So I can't say he can't. That would be very disingenuous to try to go that route. This is a tough game, but it is realistically it's for all the marbles. It's who goes to that title game.
And Franklin has been in situations like this as a head coach, whereas Ryan Day hasn't been as a head coach.
Sure.
But here's one thing I need to ask you. What team has Penn State played this year where they've seen a quarterback like Justin Fields? I mean, have they? I'll pull up their thing. I don't.
No, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm just looking through all the teams there. Who's got? I mean, let's be honest. He's the most prolific. I mean, you can now.
See, that's
passing.
That could be a problem.
Some of the bigger.
How do you?
Not the same type of quarterback, but I mean, definitely a very pass-oriented Minnesota. Purdue slings it around, but a run-pass quarterback, they haven't. They really, yeah, I don't really see it. I don't. And again, that's also why they're the number 2 team in the country. I mean,
I'm just trying to map out how they're going to stop it. Like, I understand stopping Dobbins. I mean, they've played teams that can run the ball. But how do you combine that with stopping the running capabilities of Fields? Because, if they're stopping the run, then they're going to probably might have a little tough time on the back end with the pass. But then you throw in that dynamics of him running the ball. Could be a tough time.
Penn State is not the largest front you're going to see defensively, and that would help them in the passing game. And their ability to chase him down and go sideline to sideline would benefit them. But at the same token, then that hurts you against a guy like J.K. Dobbins that can pound the ball up the middle and run past you. So no, they've got a daunting task.
I mean, like Clifford,
I don't know what they're going to do.
To draw up plays where Clifford. They're going to have to establish the run, like you said, just to soften up that defense. But that doesn't matter in terms of Chase Young. He's coming every play.
Yep.
They'll have him come even when they're running the ball and just have everybody else tackle him. And have him just come off the edge fast. So, I mean, Clifford won't have time back there. And I've seen a lot of games where he's younger and he's had to take time in the pass game to find an open guy. It's gonna.
They're not a quick hit offense.
No, and they're gonna have
in
the passing game. In this game, they're gonna have to find a way to be that.
Yeah, I mean,
he won't have time.
I would say
a lot of short crossers, a lot of intermediate 10-yard out routes, slants.
You're gonna need to break some things, break some runs. You're gonna need quick hits that break for big plays. Now, Penn State. Let me say it this way: Penn State's gonna probably have to play as close to a perfect game as they've played all year. I do think Ohio State's the more dominant team, pretty much, really everywhere. So, to do that, you're gonna have to hit some big plays. And again, it's not necessarily that's Penn State's MO, and that's probably where the challenge lies. But it is what it is. I don't think Penn State is an afterthought.
My concern is that, look, we talked about Clifford throwing the deep ball. He can throw it, but it's usually he just throws it up there. They're not dimes.
And can you get enough time to do that?
Yeah, he lets his receivers go under and get it, a guy like Handler. But then you got a guy on the other side like Jeffrey Okudah at corner, who's probably going to be the first cornerback taken in the draft. He's probably just salivating at those balls up in the air because he's going to go get it.
I mean, I think it's kind of telling that it's a 17.5 line. I will say this. I mean,
for a big game, that's freaking
I think that speaks more to Ohio State because understand something. The Big Ten right now has 5 teams in the top 15. They have a third share of the top 15 rankings. That's pretty impressive. And then for Ohio State to have the second highest team, a 17-point spread, that just kind of tells you how strong everybody believes Ohio State, which to me begs the question as to why they're not number 1. But that being that they're going to have to play it out. It will be interesting to see, and kind of how it plays out on the big picture.
I agree. All right, those are the big games of the week. So next, we're going to dive into the results of last night's Week 3 college football playoff rankings. All right. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. The college football playoff week 3 rankings are out. So we're going to do like we've done each week and roll through the top 25 starting from the bottom up. Dave, you start us out.
All right. At number 25, we got the SMU Stangs at 9-1.
At number 24, back into the college football playoff rankings after a win against SEC team South Carolina, is the 9-1 Appalachian State University. What are they? The Mountaineers?
I think you told me.
Yeah, Mountaineers.
All right, number 23, an oldie, Blue Blood, jumping back in. You know, I kind of started the year on a little stumbling block, but has made their way back, is the Southern Cal Trojans at 7-4.
At number 22, 6-4 out of the Big 12, the Iowa State University. What are they?
Cyclones.
I don't know why I missed that. Yeah, go.
Number 21, Big 12 team, Oklahoma State at 7-3. They are the Fighting Chuba Hubbards.
Thank you. I was going to say, not the Cowboys, the Chuba Hubbards. Number 20, Boise State University. The Broncos sit at 9-1.
At number 19, the Cincinnati Bearcats from the group of 5 come in.
9-1.
9-1, sorry.
Number 18, the highest ranked group of 5 team, the University of Memphis Tigers at 9-1.
Number 17, jumping in here at 7-3, are the Iowa Hawkeyes, coming off that impressive victory over Minnesota.
Number 16, independent University of Notre Dame Fighting Irish come in at 8-2.
At number 15, Auburn slipped a little after a close loss to Georgia after their comeback bid failed, and they are now 7-3.
Number 14, after that devastating loss, after they were up, 25 to Oklahoma, the Baylor Bears sit at 14 at 9-1.
All right, number 13 is Michigan, coming in at 8-2, kind of battling back after some ugly early season issues and making a move.
Another Big Ten team at 12, the University of Wisconsin Badgers come in with an 8-2 record.
Number 11, the Go Gator, Florida, at 9-2.
Number 10, the darling underdog of the Big Ten after their big win against Penn State a week ago, fall a little short to Iowa at Kinnick and come in at 9-1. Again, number 10.
All right, number 9, the highest rated Pac-12 team or Big 12 team in Oklahoma Sooners at 9-1.
At number 8, creeping back up into the mix after initially being ranked in the top 4, 9-1 stand the Penn State University Nittany Lions.
All right, and as we go forward, there was no change in this, but we're still going to roll through them. Number 7 at 9-1, the Utah Utes.
Number 6, Justin Herbert and his Oregon Ducks, or maybe Mario Cristobal. 9-1 at number 6 come the Ducks.
All right, number 5, Roll Tide, Alabama at 9-1.
Now our top 4, again, hasn't changed. At number 4, the University of Georgia Bulldogs at 9-1.
Number 3, your Clemson Tigers at 11-0.
Your top 2 teams in the country, debatable. Ohio State University at number 2. The Buckeyes sit at 10-0.
Number 1, no surprise, LSU holds on after a win last week. It's 10-0.
All right, so we're going to run through each conference, just kind of look at what's going on there in terms of conference championship games and how that, reflects on some of these teams in the top 25. So I'll start with the ACC. Obviously, Clemson's locked in for the championship game. We talked a little bit about Virginia Tech Pitt game this weekend, about that should be the winner of that game going on to represent the Coastal. There is an outside chance that Virginia and or Miami could potentially slide in there. Not sure at the end of the day. Do they have enough? Any 4 of those teams, do they have enough to handle Clemson? I think they're great stories. I just think, I know my team. We're on a different level right now.
Yep.
And I just, as good as they are, and we'll respect it and play it accordingly, but we're treating it every week like this is playoff time. This is championship phase for us. So no matter who the team is, we're going to go in and we're going to play strong and hard. We're not going to come off the gas. So
Yep.
Those are who's in there. Why don't you tell us a little about Big Ten?
All right, Big Ten. This week's showdown: Penn State, Ohio State will determine the East.
Yep.
Regardless, if Ohio State wins, and even if they lose to Michigan, would win the tiebreaker, so they would be in. Minnesota, Wisconsin will have a game coming up here the week after next that will determine if Wisconsin wins, they would get in. If not, Minnesota would get in because they will both be at 2 loss or could be at 2 losses if Wisconsin wins. So those are your players in the Big Ten. Big 12, give it to me.
All right, Big 12. Again, it was kind of funny, and I was wrong before saying Texas jumped into the back half of those rankings. That was last week. With their loss to Iowa State this week, and they fell out, and they really they swapped spots because Iowa State jumped in right about where they were, which was what, 20?
They were 21, 22.
22. Let's be honest, it's going to come down to Baylor and Oklahoma, I think, in the championship game for the Big 12, and depending on how some of the pieces fall outside of the Big 12 with those teams in front, with your Pac-12 teams, with your Georgias, your Alabamas, and how they play the rest of the season out and how one of those teams in that championship game performs, because I think it's going to require, if Oklahoma or Baylor meet in the championship game, if they have any shot at that 4th slot, it's going to have to be a blowout of epic proportions. And there's going to have to be some things that happen in front of them. So on the outside looking in, Oklahoma State, Texas, still in the mix to potentially mess things up and get to the Big 12 championship.
It will require Baylor losing 2 games.
Yeah, which could happen.
Yeah, or Oklahoma, for that matter, doing the same.
But right now, that's kind of what you're looking at. Yep. So for all intents and purposes, I think we're going to end up with that. And, chaos can happen still in these last few weeks. So it's looking Baylor, Oklahoma, with Okie State and the Longhorns of Texas having an outside shot to mess up some things for those teams and squeeze into the Big 12 championship game.
Yep.
I will say if that happens, then I think they're definitely out. Big 12's out completely.
Yep. All right, to the SEC, Georgia is locked in. Again, we talked about how that game's important, but they are locked in. LSU is the front runner, certainly undefeated. The only possible scenario that Alabama could get into this, it would be LSU losing to Arkansas and then losing to Texas A&M, which is highly unlikely. So it's almost a guarantee, but not quite, that LSU and UGA will face each other in Atlanta for the title.
Yep, and then finally the Pac-12, and it's not that we don't love the Group of 5. I think the Americans a great story. If UCF couldn't get it these past couple of years, I don't think it'll ever happen for them to get into this thing unless absolute disaster happens. But it's not going to be this year. So we're looking at Utah and Oregon in that Pac-12 championship. We hope for that. I think if the Pac-12 has a shot at getting in, it's got to be that. They've got to roll through the end, and those two face, and someone wins that game. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be huge, but it needs to be a good showing on both sides of the ball for both teams. There is a potential outside slot that USC could slip in there. Now, USC's in the South with Utah. USC beat Utah at the Coliseum. USC got beat up by Oregon, so they have a leg up in those matchups. Again, Oregon's in the North. I just don't think USC has enough. I don't think they have. You're not going to look at their freshman quarterback Keaton Slovis and say this guy's going to take us to the promised land as much as you'd like to. He's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not Tua. He's not Joe Burrow. Well, there's an opportunity, but
just simply put, USC has to beat UCLA to end the year. Okay, that's that play, and Utah has to trip up in a game.
Yep.
And if that happens, then USC is in.
Those other two teams, though, Utah and Oregon, are playing at the level they need to at this point in time in the season.
High likelihood Utah, Oregon.
And again, if USC gets in there, I don't think I think that could spell doom for the Pac-12's chances, just like the Big 12. So that's kind of where we're at. I think that we all hope that Pac-12 race will shape up, as we've said for the past few weeks, those Utah and Oregon continuing to win out and then meeting up in the championship game for really the shot at the playoff.